I was having such a good day before this piece of garbage showed up on my feed. So for those of you not in the know, younger generations are indeed struggling more than ever to get on the housing ladder. A very complex economic problem to which no one really has a solution yet, and that should ideally be approached with a lot of nuance and care. Not for Whoopi Goldberg though. For her, it's pretty clear.
Apparently, Millennials and Gen Z have a much different view of the American dream than past generations. Data shows that soaring inflation, student debt, and limited room for advancement in the workplace has made them feel that milestones like affording a home, starting a family, excelling within the corporate structure are out of reach. Every generation comes and wants to do better than their parents did. Every generation. But I'm sorry, if you only want to work 4 hours, it's going to be harder for you to get a house.
Oh, and don't mention 4 days. No, but...
I feel for everybody that feels this, but I'm sorry. We busted our behinds. We had to bust our behinds because we didn't have the option of going back.
Don't give us the housing crisis, though. But,
listen, we had all kinds of stuff.
No, it's true, but I mean, the one thing I'd say is millennials are statistically the first generation that's likely to do worse off than their parents. That's
you know what? That's what they said to us as well. Every generation is told you're going to do worse than your parents, and you know what? People pick it up and they do what they do, and they raise themselves, and this is what you got to do. It's called being a good citizen.
Before anything, Miss Goldberg, let me ask you this. Who does this help? Who is this for? Even assuming that what you're saying here is true, which is not, but assuming that millennials and Gen Z's work ethic is problematic and that they are lazy and entitled, will shaming them like this really fix anything? Is this a way to better society? Or is it a way to inflate one's ego by belittling the struggles of young workers from a high horse so high that even God would have trouble breathing? A question for the philosophers. But anyway, let's get into it. I actually do believe that money and fame destroy your brain little by little, a sentiment with which is becoming increasingly more difficult to disagree as you see more and more of this nonsense going on. Let's start with the facts. According to this survey from the US Bureau of Statistics, an agency that actually deals with this stuff and is not just a washed out talk show host, millennials work longer hours than previous generations. In 2017, millennials averaged more work hours per day than did non-millennials because they were more likely to work in a given day. Imagine that. And wait, what's this? Millennials are actually workaholics, according to this Harvard Business Review article. Millennials don't have a reputation as a hard-working generation. The caricature of the millennial worker is more or less a cartoon of an entitled recipient of hundreds of plastic participation trophies who cares less about his dues at work and more about perks like flex time, beer cards, and nap rooms. Millennials, however, were much more likely to feel ashamed for taking or planning a vacation than workers 35 or older. Millennials were twice as likely to make fun of colleagues who took vacation. 42% of under 35 workers admitted to doing so, which, oh boy, is a can of worms in and of itself. But this just goes to show that this whole idea that somehow millennials are this anti-work lunatics is completely false. We have this idea being perpetrated by Miss Goldberg and other people like her, right? She's not the only one, that people are getting lazier and more entitled over time, that there's something special about these younger generations that make them stand out. And what do you know? Although it's often said that millennials are different from older generation, there's little evidence to support it. Most studies purporting to show differences between millennials and the Gen X and Boomer generations actually just show differences between young people and older people. As they age, young people in many respects become more or less like their elders. And thus the boomerification cycle goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so we've established that what Whoopi said here was complete nonsense, which, you know, was fairly obvious from the get-go. But what I find more fascinating than anything, you know, over and above what Whoopi Goldberg said, is just how wonderfully Whoopi Goldberg embodies this process of boomerification. The lack of self-awareness from someone with so much wealth and so much influence is honestly terrifying, but also oddly enticing. Yes, mommy, shame me for my frivolous ways. Anyway, let's get back on track. As a millennial who used to often do 60-hour weeks with the occasional 80-hour weeks, I can say to Miss Goldberg, wanna swap and see how you do? I still don't have enough saved for a deposit on a home.
That's so upsetting.
For just 1 second here, I want to take the focus off Whoopi and onto this lady over here. I'm not sure who this lady is. I'm too millennial to look that up, but it's really odd to me that they would allow someone who makes sense on the show. I thought that'd be against the rules of The View. As we saw earlier, this lady said this.
No, it's true, but I mean, the one thing I'd say is millennials are statistically the first generation that's likely to do worse off than their parents. That's a
To which Whoopi replied,
You know what? That's what they said to us as well. Every generation is told you're going to do worse than your parents. And you know what? People pick it up and they do what they do and they raise themselves. And this is what you got to do. It's called being a good citizen.
how dare you come at me with facts when I have feelings? See, Miss Goldberg, I sympathize with you. I truly do. Listening to older generations putting you down must really suck for your self-confidence, huh? But you see, what that other lady said isn't really a matter of opinion. It happened. It already happened. Millennials born in the late 1980s earned on average 8% less at age 30 than members of Generation X born 10 years prior at the same age. Millennial cohorts were the first to see no cohort-on-cohort income progress over much of the decade preceding the financial crisis. Oh yeah, there was like a crisis, wasn't there? Silly me, I completely forgot about that. I wonder if the largest financial crisis in recent memory might have had any long-lasting effects on millennials' earnings and ability to afford a house. Oh, and also, since we're talking about the housing ladder, let's talk about the housing ladder. House prices at their most expensive level for 147 years. Typical property now costs 9 times the wage level, says study looking all the way back to 1846. House prices are almost as expensive as they've been for almost 150 years, relative to average earnings. And looking at this graph here, Whoopi Goldberg is what, like 96, I think? Interesting. Almost as interesting as this price explosion here, with which our lazy millennial wages weren't able to keep up. Holy shit. Maybe our wages lack the necessary work ethic. I have worked 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, and 20 hours a week. I started working at 15 and I am 40 years old now. No one, and I do mean no one, should work over 40 hours a week. It's just unhealthy. I would say that 25 to 34 hours a week should be a normal job. In your free time, learn to paint, draw, woodworking, grow a garden, write, or any other number of hobbies. Your happiness will skyrocket and you will be a healthier individual. But won't somebody think about the corporate profits? As always, I like to end these videos with a little bit of a heart-to-heart. The 2008 crisis, and then more recently, the COVID pandemic hitting the world in relatively quick succession, it's tough out there, bro. The labor market has never been this tough. So it's extremely understandable, to me at least, that many people are begging for something to change. I completely understand that. And at times like this, the worst thing that you can do is what Whoopi did and shame people for their current situation and for their desire to see things changing. Which is why I believe that this sort of rhetoric is so insidious. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Are millennials and Gen Z really so detached, as these people say? Or is there something more to it? At the end of the day, I believe that being solution-oriented is perhaps the best thing we can do in these times. Oh, and as for Miss Goldberg,